The wonderful tones of the Pie Tasters set us off here on this Sunday morning, 10:20 Eastern Standard Time here on the East Coast from our lovely studios in Virginia Beach, Virginia, the United States of America. This is the Round Robin. I am Stephen Murray, nephew Dave Metzger, right next to me. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And we are off on this first full week of preseason NFL action. And that's not really why we're here to break down the preseason, although there is a lot to learn. I'm going to get to that in just 1 second, David. But what we will do is start looking for everything that we need to for the regular season. And that's the gist of our program here, is that we look at every wagering and fantasy angle that there is alive, and we try to dissect it, and we try to produce wagers that we can invest, not so much try to turn that into a phenomenal, fantastic profit, which we do fairly decently at in the last couple of years. And we hope to continue that trend here in 2024 into the 2025 playoffs. So that's our dealio. Stick with us. We'll go fantasy heavy with Dave Del Grande later. Me and nephew Dave here, we're going to take a look at the AFC. We're going to go ahead and take a look at a few of the potential 2-touchdown scores like we did with the NFC last week. You can go back to our YouTube channel and watch last week's show. That content is not dated. It can carry you through a year for the next few weeks as well. So if you need to go to our YouTube channel, Deep End 757 Broadcasting, or to the website, which will take you there as well, deependbroadcasting.com, then you can get squared away with the content for last week. And here we are with the first full week of NFL preseason. Dave, did you watch any preseason football?
I watched a little bit here and there. I watched, more of Washington's first drive. Wanted to kind of get a look, see what that looked like. Pretty impressive to start. It's a good start, getting some confidence for the young quarterback. So they look fairly decent there also.
And you'll hear a lot of people say, you can't take anything out of the preseason,
right. Scrub
against scrub. They don't play anybody. I think that's for the most part true, but I think there are also some things you can get out of it. I will use the word intent. It seems like some of these teams kind of look like they've been practicing a lot more than others.
Right.
And you aren't using the pads so much anymore. But here you are with the Carolina team the other night, and yeah, they are using what would be their third quarterback, Jack Plummer, on their, they played basically the whole game. And they really look like a turtle trying to wallow itself through a big giant mud puddle and get across the thing, as it was not very exciting to watch. being at, we saw that it was 14-1 for 3 Carolina Panther passing touchdowns. And I think it was by the end of the first quarter, I was like, man, they might not get 3 first downs total, much less 3 passing touchdowns. I mean, these guys can't do nothing. So you didn't see much intent there with Carolina, where you have some other teams that did. Houston looked very good.
They did.
Coming out, C.J. Stroud hitting Tank Dell on their first drive down the field. How about the Vikings and J.J. McCarthy? We watched that game yesterday. Darnold looked fine, and then McCarthy got in there, and he started slinging the ball all over the field. The Vikings broadcast actually had Justin Jefferson basically in the booth. He was on the sidelines, but they had a microphone on with him, and he stayed with the broadcast crew for the entire third quarter. And that's when the Vikings had several great plays, so you could just hear the excitement in Justin Jefferson's voice there alone, and where maybe stock is kind of down on him a little bit because you're not so sure who's going to get him the quarterback. I'm not so sure after what I saw yesterday. What I saw was good intent by the Minnesota Vikings to move that ball down the field, and I think we all kind of laugh at J.J. McCarthy moving up the draft charts last year. Like, yeah, you can't be serious. Michigan's a running team. I mean, he didn't do anything, but he looked more NFL ready than a lot of people did this past weekend. How about the number 1 pick overall, Caleb for the Bears? I mean, he looked good too. He was throwing a few darts around the field. The Bears kept their starters in for a decent amount of time there in the first half. They played with very good intent. They were moving the chains, getting first downs. Let's see, who else kind of rang the bell on me? I wonder if we're sleeping on Jacksonville a little bit. Everyone has the Jacksonville Jaguars stock down, and you can't take nothing out of a preseason win over the Kansas City Chiefs, 26-13. But Travis Etienne is a baller, and we saw that on their first drive last night. They get into the end zone. I'm going to ask Del Grandy about that fantasy-wise. I mean, who's going to be the breadwinner there for the Jaguars? They have the rookie coming in from LSU, Brian Thomas. They also have Kirk. They're declared number 1, but is Christian Kirk really a number 1 wide receiver option on teams? There's a lot of teams out there, when you look at their wide receiver room, you're like, man, this is crazy. Like, who's going to be the guy to step up and lead the way out of this receiving core to get all the yards, to get the touchdowns? And then you look at other receiver cores, and it seems like they're flooded with talent. And for example, and might not say that right now, but that's the purpose of the show, is to try to expose these kind of things to make it pay off in the future. But you look at a team like the Giants, and you're like, yeah, I don't know who that guy is. I don't know who that guy is. But the fact is, they do have young talent at the receiver core, and most of these guys have only played a season or two. So, yeah, you don't know who they are, but we saw what Puka Nacua did last year coming out of nowhere. It happens all the time. I mean, who is St. Brown before he became a superstar, right, for the Lions? So you see these guys coming out of nowhere all the time, and it's good to try to identify that sort of thing, and that's what we're going to attempt to do on this show, not just now, but every step moving forward, to be honest. We're always looking to be one step ahead of the game and one step ahead of the books in order to get our good payouts. So teams that played with decent intent, the Packers were one of those. Jordan Love to Dontavian Wicks for a long touchdown yesterday. The Titans, again, another team, you're like, all right, yeah, Tennessee, whatever. Levis looked good. He has a nice, quick, fast release. And if you look at their wide receiver core, it is stacked to the gill. It really is. And we were even kicking the dirt on Tony Pollard's grave a little bit last week, thinking that Spears, the running back for the Titans, could be the breadwinner in the backfield for them. But Pollard looked great last night. He's still only 4 or 5 years removed from being a college player. It's not like he's an old man of any sorts. So Tennessee has plenty of weapons. If Levis can just continue to be good, and really it's going to come down to these offensive lines, and we're going to probably take a better look into that next week, or definitely before the season. These offensive lines, if they can hold up, are going to give some of these quarterbacks, like a McCarthy, like a Levis, they're going to give them a good chance. Caleb Williams, etc. With all of that. So I took a lot out of the preseason when you're not supposed to take much at all. Teams playing with good intent. I'll throw the Raiders on that list as well. They got a quarterback battle on their hands, but they were aggressive. They were trying to move the ball down the field. I know they stopped Minnesota early in the game inside the 10-yard line, and they're backed up to their own 4 or 5 yard line, and they went right down the field and scored. So teams playing with intent. Good to see some of that here week 1 of the preseason. We'll see how that translates that into week number 2. There are a couple of games today as well. Denver is at Indianapolis. Dallas, they are at the Rams. Did you like what you saw from your Commanders, Dave?
Yeah, mostly from what I watched. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch the kind of first half to see, what the feel would be for us. Jaden Daniels, he looked sharp. Threw a nice pass there, his first completion down the right sideline. That was a big gain there, and then he had the RPO little run there in which he scored. So he gets on the board, and he looked like he was enjoying himself and, getting a little bit of confidence, which is what you want in the young QB. So I think, I know for myself, that was mainly my purpose of watching, to kind of see how he was going to come out. Again, it's preseason. But you got to think, there are some starters in there at the beginning of the game, just to get them a little different feel than something like practice. So I think he looked pretty good, and hopefully that confidence continues to grow, because we know what we have with the running backs. We know what we have with the receivers. I don't think anybody's really truly worried there. It's what's this, new young quarterback going to do. And, so far so good, Steve. So hopefully that progresses. And if he can progress and be what we all think that he can be, I think we'll be in good shape offensively anyway.
Sam Hartman showed some promising things. The Notre Dame quarterback. Right. He played most of the second half for Washington yesterday, but he was able to get into the end zone once. Had some really good throws down the field. A couple of the drives stymied, I think, for breaking down and blocking, which is going to happen, right? So you can't pin everything on him if he's not going and getting like 3 touchdown scores. But Sam Hartman, the Notre Dame quarterback, looked very good yesterday for the Commanders as well. All right, so lesson to be learned just simply on that. Just when you think there isn't much to take out of the preseason, you can grab a little bit. It never hurts to have that extra little research, and we'll try to get ahead of the sports book the best that we can, using the preseason to our advantage. All right, we went through the NFC last week. Let's go ahead and look at the AFC this week. And let me go ahead and pull up some odds. Probably should have them on my main computer here, but it's a fiasco trying to log onto the sports book sometimes when you are playing on your phone. They want to double check your identity and all kinds of crap. We just don't have time for that right now. Okay, so let's see here. Let's start with the old AFC East. That would usually be the division that I am the foremost expert on here, being a Patriots fan. But the Patriots are the big underdogs to win that division. They're all the way down to 24-1 odds right now for that. The Dolphins are your third pick at plus 220. The Jets plus 170, and the Bills plus 165. And from what I got out of doing the research and talking to Dave Delgrandy, who will play after our time here this morning, Dave, and looking at this Bills roster, I talked to Dave yesterday. That is a recorded interview because he is on the West Coast. We do him on Saturdays for our Sunday show. But the Bills, man, their receiving core has a little bit, left to be desired there, man. Really, Shakir is there, and they got the rookie Keon, right? So, what's Allen going to have wide receiver wise? Which, if they're going to take a step back, then that's going to open a door for teams like the Jets and the Dolphins. I can make a case for either one of those two teams to win the AFC East this year. The Patriots, I think, can surprise people, but at the end of the day, I just don't think they're going to have an offensive line that's going to hold up. I think whoever they're going to throw a quarterback is going to have issues just from pass protection alone, just from what I've seen and researched already. But Lions can gel and get better for sure. But what's your gut feeling right now on this division, Dave?
So my gut, Steve, is telling me to probably go with the more popular pick in the Dolphins. The Jets are going to be one of those show-me teams that, you always talk about. I have them listed, tied with the Bills here on my book at plus 180. I'm just not 100% sure why that is. You've got the Bills who have been, taking that division as in the last couple years. Again, with the Bills, my worry is who are they throwing it to? They have some names here.
They got the tight ends. They do have.
They have tight ends, Steve, but they have names in this wide receiver room that I'm looking at. Can they stay healthy? And I mean that because, now they have Curtis Samuel. We know him from his time in Washington. He just came from there. Guy's got all the speed in the world, but he can never seem to just stay fully healthy. So I think it's going to be situations like that for the Bills, and that makes me unsure of the Bills. And I just think that, again, especially offensively, that the Dolphins have the firepower. And I think that, it's basically their division to lose, Steve.
Already, too, and we've discussed injuries last week, how that's going to impact things moving forward, as there are always injuries. And teams like the Bills, as discussed last week, when they got to the playoffs, they just didn't have anyone left standing on defense. They got a defensive line injury yesterday. That's going to be a little bit concerning. Moving forward, we'll see how that impacts them as they try to leave out most of the starters. But that's a team who can't afford to have a bad defense. I think no matter what, when you have Josh Allen, you're going to have a puncher's chance, but you better have a good defense. And if you don't, they're going to have trouble trying to keep up scoring, I think, this year a little bit, right, just because of the lack at depth at receiver. And you have teams poised and hungry like the Jets, the Dolphins, and, the Patriots are bound to play spoiler at some point to somebody, especially once they seem to get a little bit better. And they figure out who their quarterback number one is. The problem with the Patriots is the fans want the third quarterback to be the first quarterback right now. With Joe Milton, the rookie out of Tennessee, who they drafted in the 6th round, he's the one who looked the best on Thursday night. I like the Jets or the Dolphins. It's a toss-up for me there. So I'm going to play futures probably with both of them at the end of the day. But again, people, you shouldn't really be playing too many futures. Now, you're going to get locked in the good numbers now. But things can happen, like, Justin Herbert, already dinged up. Could he be out longer than we're thinking? You're hearing about Dak Prescott now with a sore ankle. These injuries are going to pile up, so you'd be wise to hold off on futures for now. I get it. You're going to get some numbers that you want. You want to have some tickets in the hand. I'm guilty of that already. But try to play the cautious, patient game as we navigate through this preseason and get up to week 1. You want to have at least a fully healthy arsenal when it gets down to it, and you're putting your money on the line to try to make some loot. So for me, is the Jets or Dolphins, I think, are going to be the ones that end up with this. Now, the Jets, you just said it, David, a show-me team. The Jets are going to have to show me a little bit as well. I do like Miami. They've kind of been in that spot. They haven't won the division yet, but they have been a playoff team here in recent years. They've kind of had the same issue with injuries as well, kind of, falling apart there at the end. But can they sustain it? Let's see how Miami does. Talk about a team who can't afford any line issues. I mean, that's another one, Miami. I mean, they're going to have a good offensive line. If Tua gets under siege and gets hurt, then, it's probably step backwards. Although you do like their backup quarterback situation a little bit with Skylar Thompson and Mike White. Both of those guys have had serviceable time under center before. Okay, so 2 touchdown scores we can kind of put on our radar for these teams, Dave. Starting with Buffalo. I mean, I think you have to go to either of the tight ends with Kincaid or Knox. They're going to be the go-to guys for sure. But does anyone else stick out to you?
Steve, so I would go with...
Josh Allen's another one.
Well, yeah, so you've got him. That's who I would probably I would take a look at. And I think...
he's cashed tickets last year.
I'm going to have to go with the tight ends as well. You look at this receiver room, and, yeah, there's guys that can score, but nobody that really just jumps right out at me. But let's just, for the sake of it, if, we're going to go a little bit different here and pick a receiver, let's go with Shakur.
What do you got for the Jets?
Let's see here. We'll pull up the Jets. Hit the roster. All right. Let's see. Jets. Well, Steve, their receiver room does not really excite me either. So I would have to go with Breece Hall, but I do like, and I've always kind of liked him as a receiver, Allen Lazard. I think he's going to get some targets there for the Jets this year too.
Breece Hall is a player that could really, really have a good, really special season. I mean, he could be offensive player of the year, to be honest. If he receives, for over 500 yards, rushes for another 11 or 1,200 or something like that, kind of gets in the upper thousands for combined yards, finds the end zone a dozen times or so, 15 times. But yeah, I think he's a great 2-touchdown scorer option. In fact, he cashed tickets last year for us as well. How do you not take Tyreek Hill for the Dolphins? I mean, he's always a 2-touchdown threat, but any of those running backs are too, Dave.
Yeah, so that's it's hard to go away from those guys. They did it last year.
They all did. They all had 2 touchdowns. Achane did, Mostert did. Tyreek Hill did.
Oh, yeah. So he's on my radar as usual. Had him in a couple mock drafts as well. So that's probably somebody that I'll be hunting down a little bit and playing tickets as well as fantasy, if I can get them on my roster.
Now, the Patriots, I don't think, had 1 2-touchdown scorer the whole season last year. I could be wrong about that. It might have been Henry at one point. I think Henry actually did. I think Henry on the Thursday night game against the Steelers had 2 touchdowns at tight end. Ramon Stevenson, just because of the quarterback situation there, you might find the running backs getting the ball a lot more as things tighten up inside the red zone and near the goal line. Anything stick out for you?
So, Steve, if that's going to be the case, we're going to go with Antonio Gibson.
The running back out of the Commanders. We'll see how he's used and how much he's used. You got to figure they're going to Gibson took a step back once Brian Robinson came in, right?
Right.
And maybe only because Robinson is such a highly talented player and played so well in training camp himself. So Gibson's still gas in the tank, probably still a lot to prove, probably has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And we'll see how hard he gets, how hard his playing is when he gets in there come crunch time close to the goal line. But, yeah, that is a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield as well.
Well, that too, Steven. And if you look at the Patriots running back room, which I know you have, besides Stevenson, who else is really going to get the bulk of
probably
the
Gibson. Yeah. Usually they have a ton of running backs. It seems like that is a thin market this year for the Pats. Okay, AFC South, Houston plus 105, Jacksonville plus 270, the Colts plus 310. Tennessee right now is at plus 950. I think the Texans have a chance to be the highest scoring team in the NFL. So you think that they're definitely going to win this division, barring that they stay healthy. I think that's a key point here. But they're going to get some tough competition here against some of these teams. And I'm telling you, I think Tennessee's a little bit of an underdog in that last spot there. But I wouldn't be surprised if this division is a little bit tighter than we all thought. Maybe these lower teams in this division can beat up on Houston a little bit. Houston does have a number one schedule. They're going to have to play. So they're going to have to play all elite opponents, and that's going to leave the door open for a team like Tennessee who's going to have softer competition, potentially to get more wins. And again, I said it earlier in the show, maybe we're sleeping on the Jaguars just a little bit, discounting them for what they can do after seeing them not make the playoffs last year. And the Colts as well, they were a playoff team. So some of these teams like the Jets are going to make the playoffs. Who is going to be the teams? And I got to figure that someone like the Colts would be the odd man out in that kind of scenario. I think this is the Texans division, but not as easy as it sounds. And the division a little bit tougher maybe than advertised.
Yes, I like Houston as well, Steve. We talked a little bit about that, with days and weeks coming up to getting back on the air here. But I couldn't agree more also with your take on Tennessee. I think they're going to be a little bit better. I'm sure they've been written off already, week one of the preseason. I like their wide receiver room, though. And, like you said earlier, if they can get some stability up front for whatever quarterback's going to be in there, I think they have a real shot to move it through the air. You got Tony Pollard back there, as you mentioned as well. He's no slouch either. He can run the ball. So I think the offense will kind of carry them in that aspect. They're going to be a little bit better. You're going to get a really good number. So in some kind of fashion, I think they're worth throwing in, some kind of ticket that you want to build up. But I think it's going to be the Texans, Steve. But I think Jacksonville will be in the mix towards the end as well.
2 touchdown scores in this division. I'll let you go first. What do you got for Houston?
All right, let's go with
any number of characters.
Yeah, we've got a couple to pick from here. So I'm going to go with probably. It's tough because I want to do both of these guys. I think Nico Collins and Tank Dell are probably going to have really good years, Steve. So I'm going to have to look between the two of them.
I'm interested to see what the payouts will be because there is so much wealth to spread.
Well, and they have bigs now.
Are they going to give you some bad payouts because of all these guys? Almost like a top-heavy NASCAR race where everyone's 3-1 to get 2 touchdowns, 4-1.
I mean,
or something like that.
This could be a really good team. Just looking right now at the offensive roster. I mean, you have Stroud is your guy. He's, he looks real good.
I think he's fantasy quarterback number 1. If you can take him and draft him, I know you can. Dave Delgrandy will preach you can get a good quarterback down the line, but I think he's worth the reach a little bit towards the top after you get a couple of studs receivers. Right. If you get your hands on Stroud, I think it's worth it.
That's for in one of my leagues. We'll see how that plays out. But you got the 1-2 punch of Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce, and then this wide receiver room that they have. Like you said, Steve, they could really be a high scoring team this year.
And if you're out there viewing this or listening, and you might get an occasional glitch, as I see on my video monitor, know that. The internet, just as a whole, after this tropical storm has gone by, has been a little bit of I just switched back to the better Wi-Fi now that we did a reboot. Maybe that will help things as well. So just know that we know that there may be a glitch or two out of our hands. That is a Cox cable scenario, people. Let's see here. Any number of 2 touchdown scores for that team. I mean, right, Dave? So you got to throw the tight end in there as well, Dalton Schultz. But hey, Joe Mixon is on this team now too, and he's a very capable 2 touchdown scorer. I just think at the end of the day, these guys are going to counterfeit each other. I'm not so sure you're going to get the great payout odds for these guys to get 2 touchdowns when we see them listed. Just like I said, it's going to be like a top-heavy NASCAR race where you're going to get 4 or 5 favorites who are, not super great payouts to win a NASCAR race, but chances are one of them is going to win it, so you got to just pick the right one at the end of the day. How about Jacksonville? 2 touchdown score for you?
All right, let's go with Jacksonville. We're going to pull this up. And I'll tell you what.
I mean, I think there's the obvious one.
There's some obvious ones. I'm gonna go against the grain here, and I'm gonna go with my guy Gabe Davis.
Back to the well with some Gabe Davis.
He's always been good. There's the one, the couple times where he didn't score, but every time I seem to put him in either just a 1 touchdown or a 2 touchdown, he either comes close or he's getting me a bunch of yards. The point is he has always been good for me in whatever capacity that I've used him in.
He's the 3rd Jaguar receiver coming off the board in fantasy right now. So the other 2 guys are getting drafted above him. So he is definitely under the radar. Travis Etienne, I think, is the obvious one. He's very capable of getting 2 touchdowns in any game.
Bigsby will probably give you a pretty good number, too, and I think he probably will do that once or twice. So if you can end up trying to, pick the game that he does that, I think you get a good number.
And this is a team, again, that maybe we're kicking the dirt on them nationally. People aren't expecting much because of the Texans. Everyone loves the Texans. Now, you got to remember last year, everyone loved the Jaguars, and no one loved the Texans. And now these 2 teams have kind of flipped the shoe here. I don't think you can get the dirt on the grave of the Jaguars yet. Tougher division than advertised, I think. All right. 2 touchdown scores for the Colts. What do you got?
All right, pulling this one up. And I'll tell you what, I'll be honest, this is a team that I have not looked at a whole lot. Let's see, you got quarterback, I think Anthony Richardson, if he stays healthy. He's got a good chance to do it. Jonathan Taylor's still there. That's probably going to be your obvious one. But I'm going to go with Richardson, actually.
Pittman is a good receiver, too. If Richardson can get him the ball. Pittman had a ton of targets last year. So chances for him to get 2 touchdowns, that can happen. I think he scored 2 touchdowns on a couple of occasions last year as well. So Pittman would be one of mine, but I think Jonathan Taylor, is the obvious one there. Tennessee Titans, you got Pollard and Spears.
Yeah.
Both those guys could be the playmakers out of the backfield, but do you have a receiver, Dave, that sticks out to you?
It's going to be the obvious DeAndre Hopkins. But I'll tell you what, don't be surprised if Treylon Burks ends up getting a big load here. I do believe Hopkins is dealing with an injury, I think. But either way, they're going to double team Hopkins. A lot of focus is going to go on to him. I think if you can get him, I think Burks will be sneaky in fantasy as well. I think
he's underachieved the last 2 years. We expected more from Burks, and I agree with you. I think this could be the year where he kind of steps out, especially if some of these other guys are declaring double teams like Ridley or Hopkins.
Right.
And Tennessee, if you just look at their roster of receivers, better than you would think. Better than you think. Even a Westbrook Akine, who started to find the end zone a little bit more last year. Is more of a seasoned veteran. And they got some guys who've been around. I mean, they got some guys who have service time in the NFL. I think that's going to help out the young quarterback. And those two weapons out of the backfield, too. Don't be surprised. Tennessee.
And Tyler Boyd is there, too.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd as well. Yep, another guy. Plenty of NFL service time for Boyd. All right, let's go to the AFC North. Baltimore is plus 145. The Bengals plus 165. The Browns plus 450. And the Steelers plus 750. I'm going to start here. And I want to see Baltimore show me this again last year, that they're capable of winning. They won a lot of close games last year. They went out in not so pretty style against the Chiefs in the playoffs. I need to see Baltimore run this back another year and get 11 or 12 wins. Right now, their over-under is at 11.5 wins for the season. That is something that, just because of that division alone, that I'm thinking about playing under on a serious play. I mean, it takes a lot to get 12 wins, to go 12-5. And that is a tougher division with the Bengals and the Browns. I think the Browns are really sneaky at plus 450 to win that division. I think they have perhaps the best depth across the board when it comes to offense, defense, position players, even quarterback. It seems like they have plenty of those now. Gone is Flacco to bail them out like he did last year, but they do bring in a Jameson Winston, which is interesting to say the least. So, excuse me. So be wary of the Browns and the Steelers. I start to look at their wide receivers, and I'm like, wow, who is going to get the ball? Pickens is the one standout on that depth chart for sure. After that, you got players like Van Jefferson. Now I can see why they're so highly into trying to get Brandon Ayuk.
Right.
Because he would change that dynamic tremendously. And they do have Freiermuth, but they're going to need him. Whoever is going to be throwing the ball, Russell Wilson or Fields. And I'd like to see it be Fields. But I can see Pittsburgh having a little bit of a harder time this year than they did last year. They won plenty of games just by one score last season. So is that sustainable? I'm not so sure that it is in this tougher division. The Bengals, again, they lose Mixon. All right, so who's going to fill the void there? Zach Moss is the guy right now. He's capable, but let's see him do that job, and let's see how Burrow rebounds from the injury as well. I just kind of like the Browns' number at plus 450 in that division. I think you're getting paid a decent number there. So that's something that I'll probably end up playing at the end of the day. But I'm going to give stock down a little bit to the Steelers, and I want to see the Ravens try to do it again, Dave. What do you got here?
So I'm right there with you. I'm going to give my pick here to the Ravens. I do think that Burrow is still kind of dealing with that injury. So that kind of makes me worried. Is that going to linger and linger and linger on, and he's going to have to deal with that? I have the Browns at plus 600, so getting a very nice number for them. Steve, I think you probably covered that pretty well. Pittsburgh, just with that huge question mark at the quarterback position, who's it going to be? I don't know. You know, Wilson seemed to be on the downcline. So the good news is they didn't pay hardly anything for either of these two guys. So really, nothing to worry about there money-wise, but big question mark for them, Steve. So I think maybe at the end of the day, the race for this division is going to be a little bit tighter between Baltimore and Cleveland than it would be with Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I think you find them doing a 3 and 4 fit.
Okay, all right, yeah. Do you think Baltimore wins that division at the end of the day? You think they're a better team?
I do.
You've always been a little bit of a Baltimore apologist, Dave, on the show. Nephew Dave loves some Zay Flowers. Is that your 2-touchdown scorer, Dave?
You know it.
All right, I'll go ahead and give you I'll give you Mark Andrews for the 2 touchdowns. But how do you not use Lamar, to be honest?
Right.
And you got Derrick Henry now. So you have plenty of options of guys who are experienced 2-touchdown scorers on that team. For the Bengals, what do you got?
All right, so let's look at the Bengals here. Your first thought would be Jamar Chase. And I still think, he is who he is. He's going to have a good season.
He does way too many disappearing acts for me.
Right.
There are weeks where he's just non-existent.
Right.
And then shows up for 2 touchdowns the next week.
So I was looking at him in a fantasy aspect, and then, watching and doing research. I've kind of pulled back from that, and I think that he is actually working his way off of my radar. I think there's going to be some other picks, which I'm sure Del Grande will get into, but that's just my fantasy thought here for the Bengals. So if we're going to go for 2.
And they're not very deep at receiver either. Once you get to the 3rd receiver, you're talking about, let's see, I got his name right here. Andre Ovius. Smart kid. He went to, I think Harvard is where he went to school, right? So he's a brilliant kid, athletic. But there's not much in that depth chart at wide receiver for the Bengals.
No. And Jamar Chase, again, being who he is he's going to draw those coverages. He's going to get a lot of attention, Steve, and I think that's going to set up T. Higgins for 2.
I mean, you're talking about guys who are 4th, 5th, and 6th receivers. You have Trenton Irwin, Jermaine Burton, Charlie Jones. I mean, you're starting to really reach once you passed those guys in the depth chart.
Burton might be good. And
even at tight end, Mike Gesicki hasn't really been blown. I mean, he was decent for the Dolphins, but he seems older now. I mean, they have Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson. I mean, a little bit of lack of firepower perhaps here in Cincinnati. 2 touchdown scores for the Browns for you.
The Browns. Let's pull that roster up.
There's one guy that will stick out to me at first, but his opportunities are going to wane once Nick Chubb gets back. But I'm talking about Jerome Ford.
Right,
I think he has a chance to do good things early in the season, at least anyway. But maybe the most improved player last year, I mean, comes out of the tight end position for the Browns, right? David Njoku.
Oh, he's. You have to look at him. I mean, God, we had him. At least I know myself had him a bunch last year, and for one, he was money on that. So, Steve, I'm going to go with a little bit different take here, and I'm going to go with a rejuvenation with Jerry Jeudy being on a better team this year to get some looks and to go in for 2.
All right. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy coming over from the Broncos. I saw over under 1.5 interceptions for Denzel Ward this year as well. I'm looking to play that over 1.5.
Really?
I think he gets 2 interceptions. Yeah, I'll try to get the number for you here in a second. 2 touchdown scores for the Steelers. What do you got?
So with the Steelers, we're going to go probably not going to be very many options here for that, I wouldn't think. I'll tell you what, Steve. I'll go with Najee. I got to think they're probably going to be a little bit more of a run-heavy team this year. You look at that wide receiver room, and you got Pickens, and you got Quez Watkins, but just not a room that really excites me all that much. And I'm thinking, again, we don't know what we're going to get out of the quarterback position with them. So I got to think that they're going to want to be run first.
Denzel Ward is minus 136 for two interceptions on the season. I mean, honestly, I almost want to put like $1,000 on that.
Right.
You'd have to risk 1,360 to win 1,000. but Denzel Ward won't have 2 interceptions this season. I mean, I think he's one of the better cornerbacks in the league. So there you go. There's a good defensive prop there. 2 touchdown scores for the Steelers for me. I mean, how about Jalen Warren? I mean, he's probably going to be used decently. He was last year. I would think that he would have an uptick, considering that there is a lack of talent there in the wide receiver pool for the Steelers. Just go ahead and give me Warren for the 2 touchdowns to put on my radar for the future. Now, if you're just tuning in, we're not giving you week 1 2 touchdown scores, people. We're just kind of giving you a foundation base of names of guys who have scored 2 touchdowns in the past, guys we see potential in scoring 2 touchdowns. You know, jot these all down on the piece of paper, and then when it comes prop time, figure out your scenario best in which this player can maybe achieve that kind of goal. But I think so far in these 2 programs, last week, which you can go back and catch the replay on the website or YouTube channel, just go to Deep End, E-N-D, Deep, D-E-E-P, E-N-D, broadcasting.com, and that will take you to the YouTube channel. Subscribe there and take in the preseason content last week and this week. It is not exactly timely or dated, so you can listen to it anytime, and it still gives you the full effect. Don't feel like you're behind the times if you missed a preseason episode. Now, come week 1, you don't want to be listening to week 1's episodes when it's week 2. When it's the week 2 episode. Let's see here. Okay, and we got one more division. AFC West. And let's get back to that. As I click through my defensive props for Denzel Ward's touchdown. All right, in the AFC West, the Chiefs obviously are the favorite, minus 230. The Chargers plus 350. The Raiders are at plus 900, and the Broncos 20-1. Can you make a case for anyone but the Chiefs, Dave?
I think it's hard to. It really is in this division.
I'll make a slight case for one team.
So Steve, yeah, you're gonna have to make that case, because I tell you what, Denver, I don't even want to get started with them. The Raiders, I don't think that.
I think Denver's still in full rebuilding mode.
Yeah,
I would say.
So you got to figure they're going to be going through that for a little while anyway. So, Steve, I guess I would have to go with the Chargers at plus 320.
I think that's the trendy pick, but I think they're going to take their lumps. Again, that's a receiver room where there's no one to throw the ball.
Right.
Yeah, Herbert's a little dinged up right now. We know that they're going to want to run the ball, but they do have Herbert. I mean, you can't run it all the time. You got to let the guy sling it. Though Randy brought up a good point. You'll get to hear this in a few minutes. But when you're down 14-0 to a team like Kansas City, you're going to keep running the ball. You got to throw the ball, right? I just think they're going to have a harder time. I think the Chargers still in a rebuild mode for them. I'm going to give a slight chance to the Raiders here. I like what they have defensive line-wise. They can put pressure on the quarterback. So that's one, as they're going to be able to produce pressure. The other thing is depending on who's going to end up with the quarterback job, and actually O'Connell looked pretty good. That's the name I left off earlier of players who looked decent in the preseason week 1. But Aiden O'Connell seemed to play with good intent himself yesterday, and they have a pair of tight ends now. I mean, that they can throw the ball to. They got the Notre Dame tight end, and now, of course, they have Brock Bowers as well from Georgia, who could be the best player in that draft when it's all said and done. A running back, no name, but good. He's a good player, right? So I will give a slight chance to the Raiders just because they can produce that pass rush. And if someone like Mahomes were to get hurt or something were to happen and Kansas City does take a step back, then maybe it is the Raiders who can kind of sneak on up there at the end of the day. Zamir White is the running back name. I was trying to roll off my tongue there for the Raiders. Um, but again, not super deep at receiver either. I mean, you're talking about their third receiver being Trey Tucker right now. So it's Jacoby Myers, Devontae Adams, and Trey Tucker, who is just in the second season out of the Cincinnati college program, not out of the Bengals. And then after that, you're talking about guys like Jalen Guyton, DJ Turner, Christian Wilkerson. All right. But I do like what they have at tight end. Bowers and Michael Mayer, two phenomenal tight ends. So you have a chance, especially if they can get a pass rush on defense. I mean, man, they are Max Crosby, John Jenkins, Christian Wilkins, Malcolm Kuntz. I mean, that is a tough front four that could wreak havoc. If they can hold it up on the back end of things in that secondary, then we know that any kind of good defense will keep you in it at the end of the day in the NFL. So, and they proved that in the Christmas Day game against the Chiefs last year. They didn't score an offensive touchdown, but they won the game, right?
Right.
So I'll give the Raiders a small chance, but yes, you think that it is Kansas City's to lose. 2 touchdown scores for the Chiefs, Dave.
All right, let's go to the Chiefs. We'll switch off of that one. I'm going to go with, let's see here. Where's he at?
And this is interesting to note as well. Fantasy-wise, the receivers are all getting average draft position 37, 38, and 39. So
Okay.
the 3 guys, Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice, all being drafted back to back, somewhere end of the 3rd round, middle of the 3rd, end of the 3rd, beginning of the 4th round for most drafts.
So I'm going to go with the rookie, Xavier Worthy. I think this guy, coming out of Texas, I think he has a chance to be, a CD Lamb type receiver in a room where it's looking like they need it there in Kansas City. Rashee Rice and Worthy, not a bad 1-2 punch, but you got to think what we've seen out of Rice. Again, he's going to pull the coverage. He's going to get a little bit of attention. And there goes Worthy streaking down the sideline to make a big play. So I'm going to go with Worthy.
I used the word intent a few times on the show already today. A player that runs with good intent is Isaiah Pacheco,
Yes.
the running back. He did pretty well for me for 2 touchdown scores once he started off slow in his professional career, but gaining steam, almost like a snowball rolling down a hill, getting bigger and bigger. That's the way I see Isaiah Pacheco, and I have no reason to think that he's going to regress in any way as well. So I'll list him for a 2 touchdown score. How about for the Raiders, Dave?
So for the Raiders, just give me I was just looking at that roster offensively. I think they're going to have trouble putting up some points at the first glance here. So just give me the obvious Devontae Adams.
I'll take Zamir White, the running back, but I think Bowers is a legit threat for day one in the NFL for his career as well. How about for the Chargers?
All right, Chargers. I looked at that roster as well. Wasn't all that.
yeah, not at all, really.
Geez, they might struggle a little bit too, as you mentioned. Give me DJ Chark Jr. for 2.
I'd like to see how J.K. Dobbins rebounds. Right now, Gus Edwards is slated as the number 1 running back. I don't think that's the case. I think it's Dobbins. Or they're going to maybe go to this rookie, Kamani Vidal, who is the running back out of Troy. But he seems like more of a scat back at 5'8". I can see Dobbins potentially being a breadwinner, but the Chargers might find it hard to get points.
And Dobbins is
right
going to need to
off the bat
stay
here.
healthy, too, because I was big on him when he first came out, and it seems that all he's been able to do is get hurt. If he can stay healthy, I couldn't agree more. That'll be huge for them. Can he stay healthy, Steve? I don't know.
For Denver, I'm just going to give you Javonte Williams, the running back. I think he's an underrated in the fantasy. He's going to get the bulk of carries, I believe, for the Broncos. So give me some Javonte Williams. Even Cortland Sutton was on the rumor trading block to go to San Francisco earlier in the week. I don't know how deep that rumor was, but I did see that come across somewhere. But give me Javonte Williams for the Broncos. Again, I think a team, you just mentioned teams not being able to score points. I think this is one of them as well. I'll give me Williams. What might you be looking at?
I'm gonna take a shot here. Let's just say Bo Nix gets the starting job there, which I think is a real possibility. I'm gonna go with Marvin Mims Jr. to draw some attention and go in for 2.
All right, so that's your AFC kind of overview. We did the NFC last week. Again, all of this content can be found on the YouTube channel, Deep End 757 Broadcasting, like deep end of a pool, swimming pool, or go to the website, deependbroadcasting.com. We're going to start looking more at the numbers on some props and stuff like that next week for some of these players. We'll let the bulk of the preseason weekend number 2 play out. I think preseason week number 3 will be the week most of these guys won't see any action. It will mainly be backups, as everyone will try to stay healthy for the regular season. But we'll start looking at some prop numbers next week. But good overview of the NFC, AFC, and 2 touchdown scorers. Just as a kind of a flat line, baseline of names we can give you to kind of put on a piece of paper and be ready for week 1. Okay, they said this guy scored 2 touchdowns a few times last year. Let's see. He's going against a bad defense and a bad team in the Patriots. 2 touchdowns for him, right? Okay. So good stuff, Nephew Dave. Anything else you want to add before we get on out of here?
No, we'll see what next week brings us.
All right. So what we'll do now is we will go fantasy heavy. And when I mean fantasy heavy, I mean fantasy heavy. We'll go ahead and cue on our man, Dave Del Grande, and we'll play his interview now. Dave, how are you? All right, there you go. Good stuff.
Nope. That was a good one.
Yep. Only me and you can talk 2 touchdown scores for an hour straight. A lot of people are clicking on through the stream.
Were they? That's what we like.
The mic clicked off the regular mic yesterday when I did this.
Really?
And went to the ambient mic. All right, let's get back to there. Man, we got to scrap that.
Oh no.
He said he heard an echo. I was like, what? All right. We're back in the studio, me and Nephew Dave. We'll go ahead and I think what we're going to have to do is bag this Del Grande interview. Unfortunately, the settings on the computer, what they go ahead and do sometimes is play lots of tricks on us. They like to switch the settings, and I think right before the interview went ahead and clicked me off the microphone mic for the telephone and gave me the ambient mic, which created some feedback, which you probably heard as well. So we'll bag the Del Grande interview. Let's see if I can sum it up for the most part. And then we'll go ahead and get on out of here. That's unfortunate. I wonder if I can play this back as a sound wave. Because it sounds good on the sound wave. Let's maybe try that. Dave, why don't you pull up some Super Bowl odds?
All right.
Real quick. We'll go through that as I try to troubleshoot. We'll see how this sounds here. The audio wave sounds good, but the problem was with the ambient mic. It's probably not going to work. Oh, the preseason for us here too, guys. In the studio. This is what happens usually. So let's see if I can pull this up. Let's see how this works.
All right, we got the odds up here, Steve.
All right, so Nephew Dave will give you some Super Bowl odds, and then go over the conference odds as well.
All right, we'll start off with the Super Bowl here. We'll do the top 8 or so here. We got the Kansas City Chiefs plus 500, the Niners plus 600, Baltimore at 10-1. I think you're getting a pretty good number for that. Detroit 12-1. I really like that. We're gonna have to play around with that number. They're a team that's probably poised to at least get pretty close again. They were pretty close last year, and I don't think the situation will change much there. So good number, 12-1, Detroit Lions. The Bengals at 13-1. That is a probably stay away from me, but they do make the top 8 here in those odds. Good odds for Philly at 15-1. Figure them to be a dangerous team this year as well. The Bills at 15-1. Just not so sure about that. Probably having that number because of recent years and being the team that they are now. So still, that's not a number that I really like for them on that one. Texans 16-1. I think you could probably get in on that as well, as we mentioned earlier. Team that's going to score a ton of points, we think, this year. So that's the top 8, with the Packers and the Cowboys making it into the top 10. 19-1 there for the Packers, 19-1 for the Cowboys as well. But let's look at a team that we mentioned, the Miami Dolphins, at 22-1. They're going to have to show Steve some stuff, he said. So we'll see what they do. But not a bad number there at 22-1 for the Dolphins. I don't mind that one as well. So teams that we see kind of being right up there in the running for that. If we go into the conference, we have in the NFC, the San Francisco 49ers at plus 250. Pretty good number conference-wise here for Detroit at plus 550. Eagles plus 600. Cowboys plus 700. There's your top 4 for the NFC. Cowboys, they're going to have to prove it. They, one and done in the playoffs. They have a great season, and then they just can't ever seem to finish. So they're going to have to show me on that one with that number there. Pretty good number with the Packers, 8-1. And then the Falcons round off your top 6 in this regard at 13-1. There's some hype there with Atlanta. Not sure that I understand it all, but we'll see what they do. They're going to be another show me team. And then we'll get into the last 4 here, which will round out the top 10 with the Rams at 15-1 and the Bears showing up there 15-1. And then it kind of really drops off from that. So we'll just stop there with them. Now, if we're going to go with a pick from this, for me, it would be the Detroit Lions. I like the plus 550 number. I think that's a pretty good value for a team that good. And again, you would imagine that they are going to stay right there in the race for it. So we jump to the AFC. We got the Chiefs plus 300. Another scenario here, good number for another good team. Ravens at plus 550. I don't mind that one. That'll probably end up getting played somewhere at some point. And then there's the Bengals again, who just have that feeling, very unsure of them at the moment, getting a 7-1 number for them. Bills, 8-1. The Texans, there's a really good number for them to win the AFC, which I think is possible. Plus 850 there. We're going to have to play around with that one. I think you're getting a really good value out of that. Again, we talked about earlier, maybe waiting a little bit. So don't let these numbers, grab you just yet, because unfortunately, as is football, there are some injuries that are going to pop up. So these numbers are sure to change, which they usually do week to week. But still a good number there for the Texans. The Jets at 11-1, another team that's going to have to show it. A good number for the Dolphins, 11-1 as well. I think that I would possibly hop on that as well. That's a pretty good value, again, for a team being that good. And then things really kind of drop off. But here's where it gets interesting. The LA Chargers at 22-1. A little bit more of a favorite than the Jacksonville Jaguars at 25-1 to win that conference. And that didn't make sense to me. Those numbers should be flocked in my mind. 25-1 for Jacksonville just to take a stab at with that. I think it's pretty good. And then we'll round it off there with the Cleveland Browns at 22-1. Steve liking them there for their division. And again, a team that, if they're going to stay decent and be in the fight, then why not? Browns at 22-1, also a pretty good number. Steve, how we doing on the troubleshoot?
Let's just see if this works. I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and throw on Bill Grandy now. We'll listen off the air, and then we may come right back to you. Stand by.
Kind of been a whirlwind. Of course, Warriors involved in the Olympics.
Did it do that the whole time, or?
So, at my settings, it clicks off this mic. It just goes to the room mic.
Okay.
So what it does is it creates feedback,
Right.
and you can't hear my voice because I'm on the phone. It's weird. It's like a. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll bag the Bill Grandy interview. Unfortunately, but I got the notes here, so let me kind of told you what he said overall. Let's see. He does like a Denver running back, potentially because of his carries. A James Conner, good fantasy player, probably getting overdrafted. A lot of questions still in the Carolina running back scenario. They got the rookie who could steal a lot from Chuba and Sanders. Lackluster receivers potentially for Buffalo. New Orleans as well. He thinks that Brian Thomas, the wide receiver out of Jacksonville, could be a phenomenal standout. Big praises for Neighbors as well. So both of the LSU wide receivers. Pass on all three Chiefs receivers. Just because who's going to be the guy to step up? Let's see. The other guys that he said to stay away from, he had a decent list of players, Dave. Devontae Adams, he thinks stay away from in fantasy. He said Saquon Barkley, because he's going to get counterfeited by Hurts. He doesn't like Anthony Richardson. And he's down on the Eagles, which we'll get more of that next week. So that's just the gist of it. Went over a lot of fantasy stuff. Unfortunately, we'll have to bag it because you don't want to hear me and feedback talking for the next hour and a half with him intermittently as well. That is my apologies too. I should be double checking all of that as far as which are the correct line ins for this show, because the settings do revert back to other settings at times. It's like someone comes in here like a ghost and clicks around the computer. So unless I go and check every time, something like this will happen, and has happened in the past. So preseason for us as well, Nephew Dave. But we'll do better next week. How about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So anything else to add, David?
No, we just went over those. So unless you have something to add to the Super Bowl or conference conversation there's a couple good numbers that I think can be played around with. But at the same time, as you mentioned, let's wait a little bit.
I think it's the injuries, man. I mean, at the end of the day, last year we were all excited about Buffalo and Miami. Think of how excited everyone was about Miami when they beat Denver by 60 points or whatever the margin of victory was. They looked like world beaters, but they've just fizzled out at the end of the day because of injuries, and they had to go to a minus 25-degree playing site with a banged-up team as well. All right, so you have to be patient. All right, Dave, we'll go ahead and get on out of here. We'll do better next week. Everyone enjoy your last day of the Olympics and baseball in the meantime.
Yep.
All right, we'll go ahead and close it out. I am Stephen Murray. For Nephew David, this is the Round Robin on the Deep End Broadcasting Network.